Hey, welcome back to the show. And look who is back in the BT studio, Stephanie Erickson, Family Caregiving Expert here on the show. And today we're talking about something very important, right? Because we talk about caregiving, but we haven't talked about the fact that after caregiving ends, what happens, right? Because it's all consuming. Let's first of all, talk and describe what is caregiving, because there's many different types of caregiving out there, right?
Yeah, well, caregiving is really just taking care of someone else, having someone else's health and safety and well-being in the palm of your hands.
Yeah.
You can imagine how scary that is. And there's all different types. I mean, we have seniors. That's usually what people think of. Children, though, with disabilities. We have mental health type caregiving, HIV, veterans. I mean, there's a lot of different caregivers.
And as I said, it's all consuming, right? When you're in that position, as a matter of fact, my stepmother's going through it right now, right? My father had a stroke, and now, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that you have to keep an eye on this person. What effect does that have on a caregiver?
Well, as you said, it's all consuming. It is so physically draining. We'll take your dad's situation, for example. Maybe he needs help walking, moving. So now your stepmom is physically trying to help him, so she's probably getting tired as well. It's probably impacting her sleep. Emotionally, your dad might be struggling, she's struggling as well, adjusting to the change. So it's physically, emotionally hard, psychologically hard, financially hard as well.
And then, unfortunately, you get to a situation where that person passes away, right? And you've been through this all-consuming situation. Then what happens, Stephanie? What's the impact on a person at that point?
Yeah, well, first I just want to say not everyone passes away, because
yes, of course.
let's say you're
right.
a parent taking care of a child with disabilities. Now that goes on forever.
Yeah.
That's long term.
You're a parent for life.
You're a parent
right?
for life.
In that situation, right?
Exactly.
And a caregiver for life, I should say.
Exactly, and that role changes as well as you go on over time, because eventually, as a parent, you're thinking, well, now I'm nearing the end of my life. Who's going to take care of my child who still has disabilities? So it never really ends. But once the role of caregiving ends, of course, we're all thinking, like, what are we supposed to do? I mean, imagine if tomorrow you're not hosting anymore. You wake up and you're like, okay, well, first of all, you wake up at 6, which is great.
Instead of 3:30.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that idea.
So the change of routine's fine,
right.
But you're like, who am I now? What am I supposed to do?
And so, what is some tips and advice for people out there that find themselves in that position, because your whole life has been, has revolved around looking after this person. How do you look after you finally, right?
Yeah, well, before we get to a tip, I think before we figure out what we're supposed to do after the fact, I think we have to recognize that there's a whole grief process.
Right.
And that's really what happens when caregiving ends. It's the loss of a lot of things. It's the loss of your role and identity. It's a loss of a routine. It's a loss of feeling valued and having a purpose in life. So I think in order to prevent us kind of going down that path of questioning who we are, what we're supposed to do, is we can't lose ourselves while we're caregiving. We have to remember and value and honor who we are as a person, separate from our role as, as a caregiver.
It's difficult, right?
Yeah.
To try to find time for yourself. I think, the important thing is you need to reach out to others, right? To give yourself that time to be yourself and have that me time.
It's really important, and even if you're not a caregiver, it's really important that you pursue something outside of what your primary role is. You do curling. It's something that fills you up outside of hosting. I love the flying trapeze. So if our work identity, caregiving would be a job, if that identity is gone, we remember that there's something else that we're passionate about. But even if you don't know, your role of caregiving ends and you're not really sure who you are, if you could use it as an opportunity to discover, okay, who am I? What do I like? And sort of go with it in a positive way, I think that can be helpful.
And resources, that's one thing that everybody tries to find after. Are there resources available for people to, find things to do, find, social things to do?
Well, certainly you can just look online in your community and say, I kind of always enjoyed cooking. Let me just see if there's a cooking class, and you just kind of look it up. But obviously, I think you want to reach out to friends, because it's hard to sort of take that first step to put yourself out there and say, okay, I don't know who I am and what I'm going to do. So I would go to actually a good friend and say, hey, drag me out to a new activity. Let's sign up together to kind of ease your transition.
I wanted to get back to, the other side of it. You were saying, if you have, let's say, a child with a disability, right? And then I guess, in that moment, as you start to age and you're getting in, closer and closer to death, which is inevitable, you need to build a support group around that child, right? And how do you do that?
A lot of times, it's the sibling who ends up taking on the role and responsibility of someone. So that's
Right.
a lot to put. But I actually worked with a woman about a year ago, and she actually had another child for the purpose because her first child had a disability, and she knew, oh boy, I better have some other kids to help me because one day I won't be here.
Yeah.
Not that she didn't love and want those
Of
children,
course,
but
yeah.
there had to have been some sort of a plan. Who's going to care for this person?
Stephanie, always a pleasure having you. You're going to
Steph-
stick around,
Yep.
right? We're gonna have a
Yeah.
little chat at 8:30, so Stephanie will stick around, and you stick around as well. We'll be back with more BT right after this.